To Catch a Predator tracked down alleged sexual predators on camera. It was compelling TV, but were Chris Hansen and his crew always the good guys here? We've gone behind the scenes so you don't have to. During a 2007 interview with NPR, host Chris Hansen explained that, in his eyes, he and the crew from Perverted Justice, the organization responsible for setting up the stings on To Catch a Predator, weren't technically going after pedophiles. By definition, pedophiles are people interested in sex with prepubescent children, and the folks at Perverted Justice pretended to be 13 to 15 years old, after the age of puberty. People who feel a sexual attraction to those in the 11 to 14 age range are actually called hebephiles, while those attracted to 15 to 19-year-olds are ephebophiles. A small distinction, perhaps, but one Hansen felt the need to point out publicly. It's not as though Hansen was trying to diminish the work the show was doing or to paint the suspects in a better light, but such things can be important to distinguish when it comes to accusing people of serious crimes. To Catch a Predator caused an immediate stir among reporters who felt the segment went too far, not just in content, but in execution. CBS News' Brian Montopoli accused the segment of being nothing more than a ratings grab, arguing that it made the news rather than reporting it.
Whose sting was this, the police departments or the vigilantes hired by Dateline?
Furthermore, Montopoli accused the segment of taking the law into its own hands by publicly exposing child molesters on national television. But, harsh as his opinion of the show might be, Montopoli also made it clear he feels no sympathy for the men exposed through its efforts. Anyone in the business of rooting out illegal behavior runs the risk of being accused of entrapment, and To Catch a Predator is no different. Yet there is a fine line between entrapment and enticement, and according to former Dateline correspondent Stone Phillips, it's always clear that the show's targets are no strangers to online predation. Phillips pointed out, clearly, no arms are twisted to get these men to engage in sexually explicit online chats. And since the stated intent of the house visit is to have sex with a minor, the ultimate responsibility lies with the men who come knocking on the door, no matter who initiates the meeting. Not all the perps collared by To Catch a Predator have been legally punished. As much as the stings that aired all seem like airtight cases, we're only seeing the footage the show wants us to see. In reality, the show exists in a legal gray area by its very nature.
This is not what it seems to be. This is not what it was going to be.
After the segment nabbed 24 men in Murphy, Texas, the local district attorney refused to prosecute the cases, claiming they were tainted by the involvement of Perverted Justice. Mayor Brett Baldwin backed up the decision, saying that, even though the men in question deserved punishment, the involvement of a television show raised questions. Given the intentions of the suspects on the show, and what they might have done had the decoys they came to meet actually been the minors they expected, the result is frustrating. As to whether the blame is on the courts that wouldn't prosecute, or TCAP for not doing things by the book, that's a difficult question to answer. In 2011, a judge threw out the case of a 26-year-old man arrested for arranging to meet up with a 13-year-old girl, claiming prosecutors failed to prove the young man actually intended to have relations with a minor. In fact, many of the suspects on the show have claimed after the fact that they wouldn't have actually done anything, and that it was just talk.
I was actually just going to stop by here to let her know that I wasn't going to be here because I have to go meet with other people.
And this particular case exploited the legal gray area between what constitutes intent to commit a crime versus actually committing one. In addition to releasing the defendant, the judge accused TCAP of entrapment. And after the trial, the defendant's mother vowed to sue NBC for her son's legal expenses. It's just another example of the flaws in TCAP's approach and the many ways things could go sour when all of the evidence seemed to line up. In November 2006, police went to the home of Louis Conrad Jr., a longtime local assistant district attorney, to arrest him as part of a TCAP sting.
He has a handgun in the house, and as the police are moving in, he takes the handgun and shoots himself in the head, sadly.
After Conrad's death, his sister, Patricia, filed a $100 million lawsuit against NBC, claiming her brother's exposure drove him to suicide. By 2008, the lawsuit was, quote, amicably resolved in a confidential settlement. In all the controversy surrounding the case, it's easy to lose sight of what Conrad was accused of and the evidence against him, not only as presented by TCAP, but by law enforcement as well.
The prosecutor pretends to be a 19-year-old college student, sending these pictures of a young man who looks like a model.
State investigators found pornography among Conrad's possessions, some of it involving minors, as well as evidence of graphic online chats. But it's worth noting that none of this evidence could be used to bring Conrad to trial before his death. And when a Columbia Journalism Review reporter asked Hansen to comment on the tragedy, Hansen replied, "If you're asking, do I feel responsible? No, I sleep well at night." Chris Hansen, a 20-year NBC veteran, was ultimately canned after being caught doing some misbehaving of his own. In 2011, Hansen and a Florida affiliate reporter got a little too close for comfort, which wouldn't normally be a huge problem, but Hansen was married at the time. In 2021, the former Dateline correspondent opened up about the scandal with Vlad TV.
Were you guys separated at that point?
We're divorced now.
Hansen obviously wasn't doing anything like the predators he grilled on TCAP, although some people tried to compare the two. Nonetheless, a scandal is a scandal, and NBC chose to part ways with Hansen as a result.
Dateline was going in a different direction.
It wouldn't be the end of Hansen's marriage, however. That came 8 years later in 2019 when Mary Joan Hansen filed for divorce. He married his second wife, Gabrielle Gagnon, in 2021. After his ouster, Hansen came up with a plan to bring back To Catch a Predator. On April 15, 2015, he launched a Kickstarter campaign to fund a web series called Hansen vs. Predator, with plans to eventually bring it to television. By May, he'd raised almost $90,000 and started production. Then, in August 2016, Hansen was hired to host the nationally syndicated series Crime Watch Daily, which celebrated his arrival by renaming itself Crime Watch Daily with Chris Hansen. As part of the new deal, he agreed to make his Hansen vs. Predator web series a part of the program. Executive producer Lisa Gregorish-Dempsey said, "There isn't a bigger, more respected name in crime reporting than Chris Hansen. We hunted down Chris the way he hunts down predators to take this job. We are excited to have him lead our amazing team of correspondents, to build on our success and take Crime Watch Daily to the next level." It's always embarrassing when a celebrity ends up on the wrong side of the law. But when that celebrity has built a career out of bringing perps to justice, it's even worse. Hansen learned that firsthand in early 2019, when he was arrested for bouncing a pair of checks to a small business in Connecticut where he'd purchased roughly $13,000 in marketing merchandise. According to TMZ, Hansen made a series of attempts to keep the store owners from going to police, including offering to pay his debt down in installments and claiming he was selling his boat to come up with the funds. But it wasn't enough. A warrant was issued for Hansen's arrest. He turned himself in and was released from jail after being booked. It was a fairly minor offense in the grand scheme of things, but no celebrity, let alone a journalist, ever wants to have a mugshot floating around out there, no matter the reason. Not many people realize this, but To Catch a Predator is technically a multimedia brand. Chris Hansen made it official in 2007 when he took the franchise from screen to page with his book, To Catch a Predator: Protecting Your Kids from Online Enemies Already in Your Home. The book is aimed at parents of children who use the internet, so pretty much all children, and offers tips to reduce the chances that kids will become the victims of inappropriate contact with adults online. While Hansen obviously has plenty of experience in the predator fighting area to draw from, he also shares tips from law enforcement, therapists, and even predators themselves in an effort to cover as many bases as possible. And in addition to advice, the book shares stories from families of children who were victims of predators, so proceed with caution. It's estimated that between 10% and 20% of child predators are female. With that in mind, it's a statistical likelihood that To Catch a Predator would have stumbled upon at least a few female suspects during the series' run. But according to a Reddit AMA with Hansen, no women ever contacted any of the TCAP decoys or chatted with the show's investigators. Hansen explained, "Experts in the field say when it comes to female predators, you're more likely to see the teacher-student scenario, as opposed to someone meeting anonymously online." Hansen insisted that the show was balanced in its investigation and that its decoys never specifically made a point to only target men. The flagship version of To Catch a Predator was part of NBC's primetime national news magazine. However, that didn't stop some NBC affiliates from producing their own versions of the show within local news broadcasts.
Am I being taped?
You are being taped.
Oh, crap.
Among the stations that copied the TCAP format at some point are WBRE in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, WTMJ in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and KSHB in Kansas City, Missouri. The format was essentially the same as the original TCAP, only without Hansen, and focused on predators within those specific communities. Very little information is available for these local versions, and none seems to have lasted for long, if they even went beyond 1 or 2 stings. Ultimately, people preferred the classic versions with Hansen as the host and the increased polish and budget of a national program. When potential predators chat with their would-be victims, they make all sorts of promises in hopes of enticing the minors into agreeing to meet. This often includes alcohol, both because they're selling the benefit of spending time with an adult and in an attempt to lower the inhibitions of their targets.
Alonzo claims the 12-pack of beer and 2 6-packs of Mike's Hard Lemonade are all just for him.
Outside of explicit details, To Catch a Predator left very little out of the online chats the show shared with the audience, including the particular products the predators offered their targets. One specific brand of alcohol that came up multiple times on the show was Mike's Hard Lemonade, a fruitier alcohol-based beverage option that's popular with younger customers. People online began to make jokes about just how often Mike's appeared on the show, wondering if it was deliberate product placement. It got to the point where lawyers representing Mike's Hard Lemonade actually contacted the show and requested that the product not be mentioned on the air anymore. The popularity of To Catch a Predator at its peak can't be overstated. In fact, NBC tried to replicate the success of the format by applying it to sting operations designed to catch other types of criminals. At various points, Dateline had To Catch a Car Thief, To Catch an ID Thief, To Catch a Con Man, and even To Catch an Eyejacker. That one capitalized on the large numbers of iPods being stolen during the mid-2000s. Some spin-offs became ongoing segments for a time, while others were just one-offs or only designed to be limited specials with a couple of installments. To Catch a Con Man was the biggest of these spin-offs. The rest quickly faded into obscurity. However, it's worth mentioning that completely separate but similarly themed shows like True TV's Bait Car, which set up a decoy vehicle designed to catch would-be car thieves, would eventually pop up over the years to ride the coattails of the To Catch a fill-in-the-blank phenomenon. The sting operations in To Catch a Predator typically used big, fancy houses. These places needed to be real houses in real neighborhoods to keep up the ruse. If predators were instructed to go to a TV studio, or if the house looked fake, it would immediately raise suspicion. The chosen houses also had to be pretty sizable, so there was plenty of room for camera crews. But where did these houses come from? And what happened to them after the show was done with them? Well, we know that at least one of them was eventually sold. And the new owner didn't know the house she was buying had been used as a TCAP sting house until after the papers were signed. Once she found out, she took legal action against the mortgage company for not disclosing that the house had been used for that purpose, arguing that they had an obligation to inform her of that and that it negatively affected the house's market value going forward. With a show like To Catch a Predator, you might wonder if anything was ever filmed that couldn't be used. More specifically, you might be curious if there was ever an entire sting that just outright never made it to air for one reason or another. In a Reddit AMA, an anonymous camera operator who claimed to have worked on TCAP said there was only one instance where a show's sting had to be completely cut, and it's probably not for a reason you would suspect. The cameraman said that the only time an entire sting was unusable was the result of the suspect swearing so much and so continuously throughout the encounter that it would have basically just been one long bleep.
Dear Lord, that's the loudest profanity I've ever heard.
Rather than attempting to parse out the little bit of actual salvageable primetime television appropriate language among all the cursing, it was decided to nix the segment completely. Though the operator wasn't 100% certain of this, they believed that the sting in question was part of the Bowling Green, Kentucky episodes. Though it might seem a little odd for a show like To Catch a Predator to spawn a catchphrase, it did just that.
Go ahead and take a seat. Take a seat right over there. Oh, God! Oh, no!
Chris Hansen typically told alleged predators to have a seat when they first entered the kitchen of the decoy home, and it didn't take long before that phrase took on a life of its own.
When they realize it's Chris Hansen, it's Dateline, I'm caught, that they sit down and they talk to you for a long time.
Countless memes of Hansen's face accompanied by the text, "Have a seat," have been swirling around the internet for years now, and the line has followed Hansen around in person. In a Reddit AMA, Hansen said that when people recognize him on the street, they frequently tell him to have a seat as a joke. One Redditor asked him how often such an interaction happens, and he responded, "Only about 12 times a week, and it never gets tiring." Hansen barely missed a beat when it came to continuing the work he was doing on To Catch a Predator after he left the show. In addition to his web series, Hansen vs. Predators, and the syndicated Crime Watch Daily with Chris Hansen, Hansen has also added another web series and a podcast into the mix.
I'm Chris Hansen.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
On his YouTube channel, he has an ongoing series called, fittingly enough, Take a Seat with Chris Hansen, in which he essentially does the same thing he's always done, except with a different title. But in 2020, Hansen returned to the TCAP franchise when he launched the podcast Predators I've Caught, which looks back on episodes of the original program. Not only does the podcast dig a little deeper into the episodes, including sharing details that were too graphic for primetime television, but Hansen provides updates on what has happened with the suspect and/or their case since the show aired. There's also a segment at the end where Hansen answers fan questions, which is a treasure trove of information about the making of TCAP that you won't find anywhere else. Hansen apparently wasn't content just having a gaggle of different post-To Catch a Predator shows to continue the work he started with the original Dateline segments. In the fall of 2020, he co-founded an entire streaming service called True Blue that is not only the home for some of his own shows, including yet another new series, Takedown with Chris Hansen, but various other types of content.
You talked about sex in the chat with her.
No, I might have, but that was all.
Might have.
Calling itself the Factual Streaming Network, True Blue focuses on series that involve catching various predators and other types of scam and con artists. In addition, the service also hosts true crime documentaries, including another Hansen-hosted show called True Crime Nation with Chris Hansen. The service requires either a monthly or annual fee, and as of yet doesn't offer any sort of free tier. It remains to be seen how successful it will be, but there's no denying that the public has a major hunger for true crime content, as well as Hansen's particular brand of predator hunting. If you or anyone you know may be the victim of child abuse and/or sexual abuse, contact one or both of the resources below. The Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-4-CHILD, 1-800-422-4453, or contact their live chat services. The Victim Connect hotline by phone at 1-855-4-VICTIM, or by chat for more information or assistance in locating services to help. If you or a loved one are in immediate danger, call 911.